So that sense of wonder, that childlike sense of wonder that is often lost as we grow and mature in some ways, we oftentimes lose something. So I'm going to talk today about how I in my life have tried to maintain that sense of wonder, that connection that I think is essential to living a full and meaningful life. So I want to start here. This is a picture from the movie Office Space, which if you haven't seen it, you should. It's really funny. But I think it illustrates that in many ways, modern life, the modern world, leads to sickness. As you probably know, obesity, depression, suicide are all on the rise in the past 50 years. And some have attributed this to a modern world that increasingly, in some ways, disconnects us from each other and also from the natural world of which we are aware. And I think that this drive towards disconnection has come from a need for safety and comfort. So Maslow talks about the need for safety as the basis of the hierarchy of needs. And if we're not safe, we can't do anything else. If we're not safe and comfortable. And as humans, we've evolved to really seek safety. When we were in danger of being eaten by lions, or starving, or being exposed to extreme weather conditions, safety was a really serious concern. So we built our world around safety and around comfort, which was really good for a long time. But now it leads to situations like this, where we're really safe. We're inside, we're surrounded by walls and paper and nothing that can really hurt us. But we lose that sense of connection. We lose the things that we gained from moving up in the pyramid in terms of love and belonging and self-actualization. So I want to talk about fish. I'll explain. So there's this joke. Two young fish are swimming along in water, and they come upon an older fish. And the older fish says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And they just think it's weird and they swim along. And then as they're swimming, one young fish turns to the other fish and he says, "Hey, what's water?" And I think for me that is somewhat of a good metaphor for the modern life that we're living. There's a lot of momentum to human progress, to the society in which we live. And when you're in the water, you don't know that you're in the water. And unfortunately for fish, they can't get out of the water. If they get out of the water, they die. When we retreat from modern life, when we step away, normally, we don't die. So this is me and a couple of my friends. Yeah, sure. Absolutely, no problem. Please, if anything comes up as we're going along, feel free to shout out. This is not a very formal official thing. I'm wearing a tie. All right. So, it's me on the left, Che Guevara in the middle, and John Muir. And I want to talk about me and these guys and sort of what lessons, how they've played into my life and what lessons I've taken away. So this is a scene from the Motorcycle Diaries, and when I was 18 years old, as a freshman in college, I went to see this movie at the Civic Theater in Allentown. And I found it really inspiring. Che Guevara was before he was a Cuban revolutionary, which is what many people know him for. He was a 23-year-old medical student in Argentina. sensed that something was wrong with the metaphorical water. He sensed that something wasn't quite right on the path that he was moving along this conveyor belt of life. So he decided to step away, and him and his friend, Albert Granado, went on a 5,000-mile motorcycle trip through all of South America. And I saw this movie as a freshman in college, and I thought, cool, I want to do that. And that was the inspiration for my first cross-country bicycle trip across the United States. And so when Che was thinking about, I'll go back for a second, when Che was thinking about leaving Argentina, he was telling a family friend about why he was going to leave. And she said, you have a year to go for medical school, you're going to be a doctor, you're so successful. She says, I don't get it. And he couldn't answer her question. And that infuriated her even more. He said, I don't know why I have to go, but I have to leave. He trusted this feeling inside him that something was wrong. And so that brings us to the next guy, John Muir. John Muir also had a habit, you may know, of retreating to the wilderness. He would go away so much and needed the connection to the natural world so much that it's said that his wife would literally shoot him out the door when he got too antsy and say, go back to the mountains, I know you need to go back. Let's just say while we know him as a naturalist, he wasn't known for being the best family man, which I think is interesting. But for me, John Muir represents the old fish. While Che Guevara knew he had to go, but didn't know what the water was or what was going on, for me, Muir knew what was wrong with the world. He could see it clearly, and he knew that he needed to leave. Muir writes about his work in the world. He says, I am losing precious days. I'm degenerating into a machine for making money. I am learning nothing in this trivial world of men. I must break away and get to the mountains to learn the news. And when he speaks about news, I found it interesting in my research to find that Muir actually studied Henry David Thoreau quite a bit. And Thoreau had this idea that newspapers, and take this for what you will, aren't actually useful, that they sort of say the same thing day in and day out. And I think Muir here is borrowing Thoreau that to learn the real news, as Thoreau did, you have to return to the source. And so I think what Muir and Che and others have sought in wilderness is truly nothing short of life itself. The source of our existence, what we come from, what we return to, I think they found that in their journey. So on my first cross-country bicycle trip, I stopped in a cafe in the Rocky Mountains. And as I was waiting for my coffee, I was casually looking at the books on the bookshelf. There were a number of books. And one caught my eye because it had a pretty sunflower on it or some such thing. As I was checking it out, a man came over to me and he said, buy this book, it'll change your life. And I thought he was a little bit nuts. But I bought the book anyway because it was been writing all day and was high on endorphins and was getting coffee, and I was like, okay, let's go with this. So the book that I bought that day was Pieces Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh. Had never heard of Thich Nhat Hanh, had never heard of mindfulness or meditation or any of that stuff. But I bought the book and I started to read it. And it profoundly changed my perspective and changed the way I think about and interact with the world. And I think mindfulness is a key piece of wilderness experience, of natural experience. They sort of complement each other in that you need mindfulness to experience the world in a direct and present way. But as my friend Kyle mentioned as we were talking about this, when you're in nature, when you are in a setting, it contributes to a sense of peacefulness and a sense of grounding. And so Thich Nhat Hanh says this pretty succinctly as he's talking about a tangerine, talking about interconnectedness in a tangerine. And he says that each time you look at a tangerine, you can see deeply into it. You can see everything in the universe in one tangerine. When you peel it, smell it, it's wonderful. You can take time eating a tangerine and be very happy. So that's pretty neat. So I think that mindfulness is the tool that we can use to tap into interconnectedness, to tap into the interconnected nature of existence of which we are a part. Whether it's in Yosemite Valley, as John Muir did, or whether it's eating a tangerine over Christmas, you can continually come back to this connection with the world, connection with systems of which we are a part. Another one of my personal heroes is Wendell Berry. And Wendell Berry speaks about the peace of wild things, that when he is stressed out by life, when things become too much, he comes into the peace of wild things. And I think there's really two steps to this process. One, find some wild things. You are all wild things. Your dogs are wild things. Your tangerine is a wild thing. Yosemite Valley is a good place too. And step two is pay attention. And I think for me, that's where this idea of mindfulness is so important. So 2 summers ago, I was hiking a section of the Appalachian Trail. And as I was hiking, I heard that one wonderful thing that you could do, if you were so inclined, was wait until it started to get dark and hike to the top of this mountain as the sun was setting, and then camp on top and catch the sunset. It was illegal because they were trying to protect the mountaintop flora and fauna, which I totally get. But I was really careful about where I was going then. So I waited until it started to get dark. Hiked to the top, got up there just as the sun was setting. I was all by myself at the top of this mountain. And I cooked some ramen noodles. I drank a little bit of whiskey. And as I was sitting up there, so as I was sitting up on top of the mountain, I could see the sunset in a panoramic 360 view. And it was incredible. And light breeze, beautiful day. I just felt this really great sense of peace and calm. And so I sat for a little while, I read, I just sat and paid attention, and then I fell asleep. But I woke in the middle of the night. And I woke up probably around 2 a.m. This is not my photo. But it's a really good one. And I just woke up and crawled out of my tent and just sat there for probably half an hour just watching the stars by myself, quiet. And I was overcome with this sense of peace, this sense of wonder of the world, to look at the stars and think, I'm not an astrophysicist, but there's billions of stars and it's a huge universe and we're this tiny part. I'm just sitting there. And it was just a magical moment. But I think while that moment is great and it's special, it's fleeting. And so I was looking as I prepared for this sermon for what lesson do we take away from this? Where does this experience take us? Because as much as I love camping and as much as I love sitting on top of the mountain, I don't want to live there. how do you bring this experience back? Because I think what we're looking for when we engage with nature is not actually the hike, it's not actually the camping trip. At least for me, it's how do we take this connection with nature, this connection with other people, and bring it back to our everyday lives. So I want to talk briefly about the world we've created and then the world I think is possible. So this is a picture of an industrial plant that I found on Google. And it's one of the ways in which we've built our world. And it's important. We have air conditioning running and I'm very thankful for it. And I don't want to criminalize or vilify this seed and uplift this seed. But what I want to ask is this really the real world? This world we've created of safety, of comfort, is this really the real world, or is this the real world? Because I think that expression, that phrase, gets used incorrectly all the time. So if we can agree that this is the real world, how do we handle this? I challenge you to think that this is not the real world, and also, this is not even the real world. This is Fiddler Square, where I think, so, sorry, some of you live. It's a wonderful, beautiful place, but it cuts us off from the natural world in which we are environmental humans. So, as I was researching for this and thinking of that, I looked for ways and ideas around how people are living out this value of interconnectedness, the seventh principle of Unitarian Universalism. One such place is a place called the Hostel in the Forest. It's in southern Georgia. It's been around for about 30 or 40 years. A man who was a lawyer in Brunswick, Georgia, got a little fed up with the corporate life that he was living and decided to start a hostel. It was at the time the only hostel in Georgia. And in every decision they make, they are thinking about the earth and the world of which they are a part and their impact and the impact on them. And it is a magical, magical place. Not just in terms of environmentalism, but in terms of spirituality. And I think that's what often gets lost in a lot of the environmental rhetoric, is that the interconnection with the world is not strictly a political paradigm, but it's very much a personal and a spiritual practice. And they do a great job of integrating both those things. Another idea I want to bring to your attention is this tiny house movement, which I think is really interesting. There are a lot of people who are thinking about space and literally creating houses that are tiny, real small, and cheap. This house costs about $10,000 and is fully powered by solar. The great thing about it is it's on wheels, so you can take it anywhere you want. And it's just enough space to protect you, to provide shelter, but not so much that it's having a negative impact on the earth. And it allows you to live in places like this, which is pretty neat. So given that the real world is the natural world, and that we as Unitarian Universalists respect and believe in the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part, how do we live lives of connection? So for me, it comes down to this question. How do we live a life integrated with the interdependent web of existence? I think it's not so much that we have to abandon all that we've built and all the protections that we've had, but how do we sort of push that boundary back to a more integrated a quote